This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. Arthur J. Stansbury's, and it doesn't make much difference, Arthur J. Stansbury's commentary on the Constitution of the United States, and according to our records that are always available from the ever faithful and accomplished Miss Francine. Catechism, question 288. Catechism, question 288. Here it is. On the Constitution of the United States, may two states be united by Congress into one, or parts of two states be erected into a third state? Answer. He says, not unless the legislatures of both states give their consent. I think it should read, yes, if the legislatures of both states give their consent, because that's accurate too. What he said is accurate. I would have rather put it in the positive by saying yes than in the negative by saying no and saying what's required. But in any case, the legislatures of such states must give their consent. And by the way, he doesn't add here, that's why I'm giving these presentations, because he did a good job, but no man says everything he ought to say. I don't either, and you don't have enough time. But the state legislatures have to give consent of the states involved, and the Congress of the United States has to give its consent. The only time that's ever come close to happening, and did happen in one way, and that was the counties that form the state today we call West Virginia, broke away from the state of Virginia at the outbreak of that horrible and bloody war between the northern and the southern tiers of the states. West Virginia said, no, we're not going with the South. They're wrong. See, not all of a substantial part of the state of Virginia went with the Union, just as a substantial part of the state of Tennessee went with the Union, just as the county where the president of the Confederacy was from, his home county in northern Mississippi, voted to join the Union. It was a county by county thing back then. And there were other counties, but they weren't in a block. The county in Mississippi wasn't in a block, so it didn't have the force and power to allow itself to leave. West Virginia did. Kentucky, southern state. At any time during the war between those two tiers of the states, about at least 20,000 Kentuckians were under arms in the Union Army, about 20,000 at any given time. State of Missouri was split, and it wasn't about slavery. It was about which side we're going to support. Texas was split, but officially went with the Confederacy. It was madness, friends, when civil, as they call internal, and that's not civil, nothing civil about it. Internal war in a country, family wars, where families are involved, and they were involved. I had family on both sides. You heard me say that. Family on both sides, willing to kill each other, happened a lot. And all wars are religious at bottom. You can't separate government from God. It's impossible. As I said a while ago, the history of mankind, the adversity of it is felt by one thing: the law of the land versus the law of the city. Our common law of government, our Constitution of the United States, is an expression of government, of common law as applied to government. Nothing new. They just took what they had in the old country and shorted up and cut away some of the dead weight and put it in writing. That's what happened. Question 289. When the colonies separated from Great Britain, was their territory all peopled? Was it peopled up with people? Answer, no. Large tracts of land in several of the original 13 states remained in a natural and wild condition. Natural and wild condition. No government. And as our forebears tramped and hacked their way across the dangerous and God-forsaken at that time wilderness, government of men hadn't been organized there, but they organized it as they went, and it was rough. And they delivered rough justice in the common law sense of the word. They impaneled juries, my friend. Oh, you can read the accounts of it. That's the first thing they did. You know, there's never a problem until there's a problem. So they find out somebody's stealing, raping, killing. Oh, now we got a problem. Now what do we do? Well, we didn't have any government before. What do we do? Well, let's impanel a 12-man jury. Put the evidence out there and see what the jury says well to do with the accused. Innocent until proven guilty. That's a ancient common law doctrine. All of these doctrines are that we hold dear. We think, oh, they come from the Constitution. They don't. Constitution is a recognition of our ancient religion, law, and government. Let's keep going. Oh, yeah. Well, we said that 89. Okay. Oh, by the way, there were wild and raw territories as men tramped their way across the wilderness, untouched by the hand of man. I'd said that. You know, we did the East Coast first. Then men in earnest during that war with Britain for separation, men poured through the gaps of the Alleghanies into Kentucky mostly. That put them in the Ohio Valley, and then they got on that river and they started west. And everywhere they went, they intended to oust, O-U-S-T, that's the good common law word, to oust the inhabitants and establish dominant rights over the countryside. That never stopped, friends. I remember reading Kit Carson. He didn't know how to read and write, you know, but he dictated a book to another fella, and the other fella wrote it down just pretty much the way Kit said it. He tried to even put the words down in a way Kit pronounced them, which was pretty earthy. Kit was about 5'9". He wasn't that tall. He was humped over when he walked, his shoulders humped over. His posture wasn't that good. He was freckled faced, something fierce. But never was there a man tougher than him. May have been men as tough, but nobody tougher. He didn't cut much of a figure. Just look at him, is what I'm saying. Don't be fooled. People sell dime novels about Kit Carson, and they'd have a drawing on the front of this great, big, powerful man, knife in one hand, a hatchet in another, whooping Indians like it was going out of style. That wasn't what he did. No, he whooped them, but he didn't cut much of a figure when he did it. You know, dangerous men don't. Really dangerous men don't make much of a fanfare about how dangerous they are. Other people may do it, but they don't. He never did. You know, the toughest Indian fighter in America, most people never heard of. He was a Swiss immigrant. You can look him up. What was that fellow's name? There was one fellow's name was Twist. He was tough too. Oh, he was terrible. But this Swiss immigrant of a Swiss family in the early days in the Alleghanies and on into Kentucky, the Shawnee murdered his father, his brothers, his whole family. And he made it to his business the rest of his life to kill as many red men as he could, and he developed the art of doing it like nobody ever did before. He's the one that developed the art of running while somebody's chasing you and loading your muzzle loader. He got it down to a science. He could do it, and he did it on more than one occasion. Well, he did nothing. He didn't want any money for it. He just hunted them and killed them like vermin. That's the way he looked at them. He didn't ask a dime, no bounty, he didn't ask any fanfare, no pats on the back, nothing. He was out to execute what he called God's vengeance. A Swiss immigrant. I've given you enough information that you can look him up and hear his story. But Carson was pretty tough, but he got into a fight in, I believe it was near Pinedale, Wyoming. What is today Pinedale? You know, in the last couple of decades, the millionaires took over Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And then the billionaires moved into Jackson Hole and pushed the millionaires out. It's a true story. I ain't kidding you. I've been there. I've seen it. And they pushed the millionaires out, and the millionaires then migrated just south down into Pinedale. Kit Carson was there with some of his comrades, and they got into a terrible, awful fight with a bunch of Injuns. That's what he called them. And he said, I'm quoting, he said it was the purtiest fight you ever seed. The purtiest fight, this is in his own words, the purtiest fight you ever seed. That's the way I remember it. You can go look it up. If I'm wrong, tell me. And then he said, we soon settled down when the fight started, determined to find out who had the best rights to the territory. That says a lot, friends. Who has the best rights to the territory? That's what America has been all about since the beginning. Who has the best rights to the territory? Did the red man get robbed? A lot of times. Oh, yeah. We're starting right in Manhattan and down what is now downtown New York City. Remember, the Dutch got there first, named it New Amsterdam, flourished as Dutch people do, but they paid for it with a handful of beads. The truth, they didn't pay for it. There was no meeting of the minds. The Dutch were thinking you could purchase the land, and the Indians didn't have a clue what they were doing. They just wanted the beads. They had no concept in their head of land ownership. None of the red men did till later, and the white man taught it to them. Before that, what, own land? That's impossible. How do you own land? We worship land. Land is Mother Earth. You wonder where that came from? That's why Tecumseh, when he met with the future president of the United States, William Henry Harrison, right south of where I grew up, along the Wabash River there. Harrison was already with the meeting, Fort Harrison close by, all had a meeting. He had a big feast fixed up. He wanted to try to get along with this leader of the Confederacy of the Shawnee and other tribes, the Tamaroa, the Kaskaskia, the Kickapoo, the Miami, the Illini. Had nice chairs there for everybody to sit in while they negotiated. And he sat down in one of the chairs and he bade Tecumseh to sit down in the other one and rest his bones. And Tecumseh crossed his legs and sat down on the ground. And he took his hand and he patted the ground in front of him thusly and said, the ground, the earth is my mother. I shall reside, recline upon her bosom. Now, is there anything dignified about that? And the answer is no. Now, Tecumseh was a great man, no question. A bust of his likeness is at the center of the United States Naval Academy. I've seen it. He was thought, the Americans thought that much of him, brutal man in battle. but merciful. He's the one that tried to stop the British when he was fighting alongside the British, the War of 1812 against Britain. He's the one that protested so much he broke off with the British against them, the British murdering American prisoners of war. And he was held in high esteem after that. But he did not worship the maker of heaven and earth. And he died a hard and ugly death. He lost the war. He was an utter failure as a matter of what he wanted and what he worked his whole life to get, which was to keep all of the land, the north and west of the Ohio River. It didn't happen because the God of all providence, the maker of heaven and earth, decided otherwise for whatever reason, and that's not my business, except to say he tells me what to do, and he does say this, listen to me. And if you don't get this, you've missed your whole possible relationship with your maker. You may be a Christian man, but you're not enjoying it. You can't unless you know this. If you're a Christian man or woman, you're born above, your relationship with your maker is through his trust settlement, the trust that he settled. And with Adam first, in the 12th and 15th chapter of Genesis, and right on through with David, with Solomon, and right on through with Jesus Christ, and it kept defining it more clearly, and it's entrustment of land. And our chief, as members of Adam's race, listen to me, please. I beseech you. This is the foundation of all of Christianity, is what our forebears called the covenant of God. What is it? That's a big fancy Latin word. It's a trust settlement at common law. It rests upon a promise. How oft have you heard the single promise of the covenant of God? The book of Galatians rests upon that. It's not a contract. It's a trust settlement, and it rests on promise at common law, a single undertaking. What did Paul the Apostle say to the Galatians? He said, your salvation, your relationship with God is not by works, but by what? Promise. And you enter into this trust settlement as a beneficiary because God chose you, named you, gave you birth. Just like at common law, the beneficiaries are the choice of the trust settler. That's God himself. And it's all about land. And then he says, take the land. Take the land. He said that to our grandpa Adam. He said to Joshua, wherever your foot goes on the land that the Lord your God has given you, take it. Take the land. If my word, the terms of my trust settlement are in your mouth, wherever your foot goes, you shall take dominion. That's what he says. Is that true yet today? Yes. If you know the Bible, it's in your mouth, it's in mental sod, the terms of the trust settlement, wherever you go, and there is no other way. Friends, just saying, and I've said this, and it's true, you cannot do what God wants you to do unless you know what he has said he wants you to do. The record of it's in the Bible. But let's push it a little further. And what does that mean? That means the words of his trust settlement and all of his law, the expression of his will. In the New Testament, as more powerfully as in the Old Testament, his will, his laws are the terms of his trust settlement, and you have been entrusted as an under trustee to Jesus Christ of that trust settlement of what? What is the entrusted property? All the land of this earth. And when our forebears came here, what did they do? It was a culture of what? Taking lordship, that's the English word, dominion, that's the Latin word, over the allodial landlord's land. That's what our forebears did. That tells the story of America. You know, there's a series of presentations in the movies, a long series back in the early and mid 60s called How the West Was Won. An attempt by Hollywood to explain it all the adventures and excitement, not all of them, but just samplings, of course. I remember particularly when I ran for U.S. Congress, ran into so many people, ran into a fella at a place called Cave in Rock. Cave in, I-N, Rock. It's a cave on the Ohio River. Still there, I've been in it. But that cave was the haunt of river pilots before the days of steamboat travel, during the days of the flatboat barges that came down the river to get agricultural and mineral products such as coal, hogs, wheat, and lumber. The flatboats were made out of hardwood lumber, floated down to New Orleans. The products, the freight was sold. Sometimes the freight was lumber, but even if there was no lumber, then the flatboat was busted up and the lumber was sold because they didn't have the same hardwood lumber down there. It was a profitable business that people all over the Midwest did, all over the Ohio Valley and the Mid-South, down into Kentucky and Tennessee and the Cumberland River and the Tennessee River coming up, the Ohio. Then it was a business that was massive. Well, at Cave in Rock, the river pirates, there were many people lived there. The Harp brothers, they were vicious outlaws. Big Harp and Little Harp. Big Harp was a great big fellow, 6.5 foot or some crazy thing. And Little Harp was his brother, and he was a small fellow. And they would lure the flatboatmen that didn't know, because the flatboatmen, a flatboatman, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, the people that own flatboats, they just made one trip down the river in their lifetime. That's all. That was quite an ordeal to do. It was dangerous. They'd try to make a fortune doing it and bring the money home, which was dangerous too, to walk home with that much money. That's why they were people like the Hart brothers all over the Mid-South and the Ohio Valley, raping, killing, plundering. It was dangerous. You had to have a gun back then. That's why we have a gun culture. That's why it's so strong and still yet today. It's dangerous. But in that movie series, they had a section in that movie series about Cave in Rock and the riverboat, the flatboat pirates that were there. Flatboats just floated down. They never went back up, hardly at all. Maybe a few. It was just such hard work, and they had to pull them. They did do it some, but most of it just downriver. Well, this fella that I met when I was running for office in that county where Flat Rock is, or where Cave in Rock is. Oh, there's Flat Rock too. Flat Rock is on a little tiny town on the Wabash River, and Cave in Rock is a little tiny town on the Ohio River. We had a check written out to him from the movie company. It was one of those big ones like MGM or something, and he was an extra that they had hired to be in that movie with Jimmy Stewart, and Jimmy Stewart was in the part about Cave in Rock. He was a riverboat pirate. He played the part of an old pirate that was, well, he was tied up with the river pirates, and their records of their shenanigans are well known as well. But America is about conquering land, and our common law tradition is called the law of the land. That phrase lifted out of Magna Carta. Long before that, our common law revolves around land. Why? Well, it's from God, and God gave us that law of nature, and it's in the Bible as well. God gave us the Bible. He gave us our common law of nature, and both of them are about the thing from which all wealth arises. Not some, not most, not 98%, but all wealth arises from the land the Lord our God has given us. That's why it's called the law of the land. And the policy of the law of the land is But if you're not using land and making it productive and really making it productive, you have no rights to it and somebody else can take it from you. And we have doctrines like that in our common law tradition, such as adverse possession. Land, the title to land goes to him that occupies and uses it, period. And we came to America with that idea, thinking the red man didn't have a clue about that. He didn't use land, he lived on it and worshiped it. And because he did that, he did not enjoy it. Oh, yes, he did. I know some of you tree huggers will say, oh, he enjoyed the land. Well, if you think that worshiping the land and practicing cannibalism in spades and practicing homosexuality without restraint or limit and swapping wives around when you can get away with it, which is pretty often among the red man tribes, and believing and practicing the idea that pain pays for your sin. So if you torture people, that was a lot of it too. And there a lot of torture went on among the red man tribes until even and through the Apache, the end of the Red Man Wars. If you believe that's enjoying life, okay, but that's not. No, there's much more enjoyment. Enjoying the land the Lord your God is giving you, and if you worship it, you'll be like the people that worship cows in India. The whole culture worships cows. Do they enjoy eating beef? No, no, no. They worship cows. Do they enjoy eating anything that is filled with protein? No, because they worship all the animals. You could be eating your uncle because of what they believe about incarnation, reincarnation. If you worship any part of creation, animals, the earth, everything comes from the earth. You're worshiping the earth. If you're a tree hugger and worshiping trees, you're worshiping the earth. If you're worshiping a man or women or anything, a statue, an idol, you're worshiping something that arises from the land. Everything arises from the land, and all wealth, as I'd said, arises from the land. And if you worship the land, you're worshiping wealth. You're worshiping a created thing. What did God say? What did Jesus Christ say? He said this: the only choice you have is to worship God, the Creator, or, he put it in this terms, or wealth. And the ancient word in the New Testament is not translated, it's transliterated. So we have to define what it means. It should be translated in the Winterized version. I translate it. What does it mean? It means wealth. That's what it means. You only have two choices: to worship things, created things, some part of creation, or the Creator. Paul the Apostle says in the first chapter of Romans, that's the only choice you have. And if you choose wrong, you won't enjoy the wealth that God has given you. We used to say, I was a geologist. Well, I practiced geology. I should say I'm still a geologist. I practiced it in the gold fields out west as a geologist working for a corporation and some individuals. And I was in the oil field at home, grew up in the oil field. Dad worked in an oil patch. We used to say, I've heard people say that were smarter than me and geologists, if you want to know where oil comes from, ask a German geologist. He knows all the theories about where oil comes from, and he also can describe them all and give you the presumptions that all of them have. But if you want to get oil out of the ground and enjoy it, make money doing it, and have a car to drive that uses oil to burn gasoline, ask an American geologist. Why? Because an American geologist is from a common law culture, and he didn't give two hoots and a holler where it comes from. What he wants is to conquer the ground, get the oil out, and enjoy it. God wants us to do that. He tells us that. He says, do it according to my terms. Don't be wasteful. Don't wipe out entirely the buffalo herds. Don't wipe out entirely the quail. Don't take all the quail from the nest. Don't take all the eggs from the quail nest. No, he said, don't do that. He tells us exactly how not to waste the environment around us, the natural resources we have. He gives us first principles about how not to do that. But he says, he commands us to enjoy the land, the earth, and all that in it is. That's the policy of our common law tradition. Remember, there are 2 volumes, only 2, these and no others, these and no more. The laws of nature, unwritten, lex non scripta, in the nature of creation and the laws of nature's God. These things I'm saying aren't new. These things I'm saying, think I'm smart enough to figure this out? I just go to the Bible. That's what the Bible says over and over and over. And I add to that. I'm in good company. The people that founded America in the beginning believed these things as convictions, unassailable. Well, what question are we on? 289. And one of the things about our Declaration of 76 we're talking about, we will talk about, Lord willing, is that the Crown of England told the colonists that they could not enter new land. In other words, he drew a line and he said, you can't cross the Alleghenies. And if you do, we will hang you, draw you, quarter you. Oh, he was ugly about it. Highlander officer in the British Highlanders named Ferguson in North Carolina sent word to a group of men that had crossed the Alleghenies to settle, called appropriately the over mountain men because they went over the mountain, sent word to them through a messenger, come back or I will come there and capture you, and I won't just kill you. I will bring the full force of the law in the empire here, that they call American empire. Common law didn't apply. Therefore, you're all outlaws. The law of the city applies. Our common law tradition has no jurisdiction. I just do what the king commands. This is the empire in America. He's the emperor here. And he's commanded me to take you, attach a team of horses to both ends lengthwise of your body. One team attached to the ankles, the other team attached to your wrists, and put the pressure on you. Pull your joints out of joint. Then hang you by the neck, and before you die, cut you down while you're choking. And while you're laying there, hold you down, cut your belly open, lay your guts beside your body, cut your private part off, your gonads and your male member, lay that on top of your guts, set you up, and if you're not unconscious by then, you can watch us while we burn your guts and your private parts. The stench was terrible from what I've read. And then, after that, we're going to string you up again and let you hang there until you're dead. And then we're going to cut you down and cut your body into 4 or more parts, put them in a large bucket, put a lead seal over the top, ship it back to the King of England with a note on top written somehow to be disposed of at the pleasure of the King of England. He sent a note to him telling him that. This is a true story. They read it. They held a little council, said, well, what should we do? Well, we ain't going back. We've worked too hard to clear this land, rear our cabins. We got our families here. You risk your life just going back across those mountains with all those engines out there trying to scalp us constantly. We ain't going back. But here's what we are going to do. We're ticked off enough. He swore he's coming after us to kill us. We're going to beat him to the punch. We're going after him. And they did. Did you know they knew the best way across the mountains? They found him coming to get him. They met him. They saw him before he saw them. They were camped on top of a mountain called King's Mountain, still called King's Mountain. They surrounded King's Mountain, had the disadvantage coming up, and they just came upon them early in the morning before they expected it and started firing and killing, killed over 200 of them, almost all of them, including Ferguson. The Over Mountain Men, a story that is hardly ever told. I asked a professor of history that was getting ready to retire, a professor of American history. I was interviewing him on the radio. I said, by the way, have you heard the story? Can you tell us the story of the Over Mountain Men? Retiring, he was, a professor of American history, a professor of the history of the Revolution, the war for independence from Britain. He said, I don't know who they are. Well, he was my guest. I didn't want to embarrass him because he was ignorant of the subject he was supposedly spent his life studying. He had written a book that was very good. I looked at the book and I liked it. He had proven that none of the framers of our Constitution or the prominent nine, I think, of the what we call the founding fathers, none of them were deists. None of them. He said it's a misnomer, and he showed why. They weren't Christians, some of them in the sense we are, and they probably were not born from above, but they weren't deists. We know that. And that's why I was interviewing him. And he made this comment. Listen to this. He made this comment to me. He'd been a professor at a very conservative Christian college for years, getting ready to retire, and he said this to me. He said the American war for separation from Britain was sin on the Americans' part to even challenge the crown. I said, oh, okay. I didn't want to embarrass him. I said, oh, and why do you say that? Romans chapter 13 is clear, he said. Romans chapter 13 is clear. Well, that's not true, and that's something we can talk about sometime, and I need to. But he made the point. He made the point. He didn't know anything about the Over Mountain Men. George Washington, of course, heard the story of what happened, and it was during the war. He said, if I had 2 or 3 units like the Over Mountain Men, this war would be over real quick. There weren't that many of them. That's America. They said, no. What were they saying? Listen to me. They were saying we have the right to enter new lands, occupy, dominate, and enjoy if nobody else is. And moving into those mountains, the red men did not have clear rights to a lot of those places. For example, Kentucky. Kentucky is a large place, covers a lot of territory. Why is it called Kentucky? Because Kentucky in the red man's tongue means field of blood. Field of blood. Why is it called the field of blood? Because the hunting there was over the top wonderful. No end of buffalo, as they used to say, buffalo. No end of elk. No end of bear, grizzly bear, black bear, brown bear, if that's what you want to eat. No end of prairie chickens. Geese when they flew through. No end of squirrels and rabbits and deer of all kinds. No end. And the tribes would come in there on hunting expeditions, but they'd often run into other tribes and they'd try to kill each other because all of Kentucky was clearly disputed territory, even among them. And there were some tribes that wouldn't go in there because they didn't want to get killed, or they didn't want to have to kill others, and they thought they might lose, and it was just too risky. So what did the white man do in his Christian culture? Once the Cumberland Gap was discovered, they poured through there by the hundreds and thousands during the war for separation from Britain. After the war, filled up Kentucky. Well, the red men didn't like that. And we have on record, and there are probably a lot more in those days who kept records, but we know about 1,500 white men and women were roasted alive and eaten. We know that from the records that we have, the evidence that we have, the written evidence. What drove the white man to do that, to risk that, to bring your wife and children? These were settlers that brought their women folk, their children. Oh, the stories, I've read them all. I've read a lot. You had to be willing. If you had to want the land bad enough to take it. One more point. I don't want to forget this in this presentation. Jesus Christ made the point, thinking it was in the first chapter of Matthew, no, the 11th chapter of Matthew, and then I believe in the book of John, but I know it's in the 11th chapter of Matthew. What did he say? Jesus Christ said, from the time of John the Baptist, or from the time of the prophets to the time of John the Baptist, and the second record we have of him saying it in the other gospel, he says, and from John the Baptist forward, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom, that means ablative of source, the kingdom that comes from heaven. That's where God lives right now. The kingdom from heaven, he said, violent men take it by forceful taking away. That's the Greek text in the raw form. It says that. All the good translations say something close to that. But the words, two words there, stress force and violence. Two words.
Say, Brent, I never heard that preached down at the church when I was growing up, and I used to go to Sunday school, and they used to say, well, we're supposed to be loving everybody, and we're not supposed to do stuff like that.
Or does the Bible say we're supposed to love everybody? Well, yes. Even our enemies. Okay, how do you do that? My father was at Okinawa. The battle started on the 1st of April and went for a number of weeks. He arrived on the 1st of April. The Japs knew they'd lost the war. They knew that would be the last battle. They said, we can't win, but maybe we can make this battle so bloody, so cruel, that the Americans will hesitate to invade the home island. That was the whole purpose of that battle, from their perspective. The kamikaze attacks were the greatest there as any place in the Pacific, by the hundreds. And they were successful in their attacks, but they didn't win the war, didn't win the battle. They killed thousands upon thousands of sailors. They had creative and innovative ways of doing it besides kamikazes nobody ever talks about. Just not as sexy, I guess. They had built rails from the tops of the mountains down to the beaches, and they'd put massive explosive devices on them, and they'd come down there like a rocket sled, going gravity, going hundreds of miles an hour, and right out to where the ships and the troops were landing, and hit something and cause a massive explosion, crippled landing ships so other ships couldn't come in, killed massive numbers of troops and men. Why? Why did we risk all that? Why did we do that? That's what the people that our forebears poured into Kentucky and a whole lot of other places faced, not only every day, but all night long, no matter where they were. What motivated them to do that? What kind of an impulse would drive people to do that? Now, there are a lot of people that didn't. They were scared. They wouldn't do it. Why risk everything I've got here to go there? It was the Christian culture that said land is the source of wealth. It wasn't something they thought about as much as just who they were, because of Christian culture infuses your whole system. That's what has made us what we are. And it was always for land, always, always, always. And no country in the history of mankind has had that kind of ambition to conquer land. The war with Mexico was about doing that. It was about bringing America from sea to shining sea, as we used to say. That was a big deal. And we knew that had happened here. And now we have access from both sides, and we're insulated from both sides from the rest of the world. You don't think that's not important? Of course it is. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dog keep up a racket all night long.